book discussion, Crux, a novel by Gabriel Tallent. I'm done with the novel now, so I've had 2 episodes before talking about impressions. This is now a formal discussion of the book after I read it, and I have to say it turned out to be a really nice book. I would give it an 8 out of 10. There's some issues there, but which I'm going to discuss. I want to focus on 3 things. One is the purpose of life. This is a purpose of life type story from the perspective of 2 high school seniors that are facing difficult decisions in their lives. I want to talk about the sort of political aspect or the social aspect of the novel, which is kind of sipping through, and it's a little bit annoying, to be honest. But I guess maybe that was part of the deal, to have these kids focusing, or facing more precisely facing difficult life decisions given the social circumstances. But I think this novel could have been written in any kind of social environment. Again, I'm a bit sick and tired of social activism and all of that, but maybe I'm overreacting here. But I want to talk a little bit about the futility of social activist writing and how this novel could have been maybe much more palatable if it had not been, sung through the social activist prose that unfortunately is still going around in the cultural circles. Third, I want to talk about the literary techniques. I always do that just as a fellow writer. I like to think about what the author did, and it's not a critique by any means. This is definitely not a literary critique podcast. There's much better podcasts for that, but it's just my thoughts on how the author did what they did and how and what was done well and so forth. So let me start with like the purpose of life. I mean, this is a purpose of life story. This is it. I mean, it sounds big and grandiose, and maybe it is. And I think that's the biggest achievement of the novel, which is to really embed this big question in in the small world of 2 teenage high school seniors in a godforsaken desert town somewhere in the Mojave Desert. So it doesn't sound very grand. If this had been maybe a New York City private school environment, you would have had maybe more, you would have been more attuned to it, or you would have felt maybe this is a much bigger story, a Catcher in the Rye kind of story. I mean, this is definitely, Catcher in the Rye meets Out in the Wild or something like that. But I think that's by far the most accomplished piece of this book, is how the author was able to embed these big questions into the not small but teenage sized brains of these kids. I think that was really well done and very believable. To me, that's very important. Reading novels is really enjoying stories, and stories, they have to be believable. They don't need to be real, but they have to be believable. There's a fundamental difference between that, and they are believable. You can definitely see people, even yourself, living through the issues that these kids have. And I think one of the biggest scenes in the book is when Dan decides whether he should go to college or not, and what is his purpose in life. And I think it really comes down to love. You can see that in Dan's reaction when he eventually goes to university and he's alone. He doesn't have the support that every human needs, which is love, by somebody. Ambition, intelligence, success, they're all, icings on the cake. The cake itself is love. You need to have love and believe in something. And Dan doesn't have that. That's why he's depressed. Versus Tama, she has it. And unfortunately, the character of Tama has been, I would say, definitely misused by the author. And I listened to the book, so the reader has been really going all on the Tama character. It's just, it was too much. She was portrayed as a sociopath when in fact she wasn't. And I think that the switch in the plot from sociopath to hero of the book, believable and likable hero, was pretty abrupt. And I think I would say that's a little bit, yeah, it's not so great. Let's leave it at that. But it's okay. I mean, you can't. If I take a bit of a, if I take the luxury of criticizing the author, I would say you made it a little too extreme. Like, it's not believable. Both sides of Tama, it's a bipolar person here, and just feels a bit too much. So it would have been nice to see her a bit more likable in the first part of the book, and then she could have transitioned into this really likable, lovable character that actually gets stuff done, that victimizes, becomes a victim of bad people, and still stays strong and actually really does what she is eventually, what she always wanted to be, which is a strong person, a strong a risk taker, and a person that defies life and doesn't yield to the typical pressures of life, because that's what she does. But she doesn't do it on the boulders and canyons of the West. She does it in the home with her sister and the kids of the sister. So that would have been a nice transition, maybe a little bit less extreme. But nevertheless, I think love. I mean, Tama finds love in the end. She finds the necessity. She finds the way to live. She understands, and she internalizes the strength of a person that actually has a purpose, and the purpose always in life has to be love. Love towards family, love towards a person, or both. And I think that's what Dan is missing. I think there's other characters in the book. They're, sidekicks or supporting characters that help shape the story. Some of them are maybe a little bit exaggerated also. It's the typical sort of poor white trash type story of the United States, and that's fine if that's what it is. I mean, there are people who live like that, paycheck to paycheck. They live in big box stores. They, the men work on construction, and the women, if they work some 9 to 5 minimum wage type jobs. These people exist, and they fight and struggle, and they hope to bring their kids into a better world. And I think that's fine. And I think we all face this. It doesn't matter whether we're poor or not. It is our duty to make to give our kids a better life. And I think those who don't, and there's some adults in this story that don't do that are very selfish and certainly not likable. Like, for example, Tama's mother, they are not, they're just doing something wrong. This is wrong. And I think Tama has, I mean, that's her shortcoming. And maybe that's what Tallent actually did, showing that a child growing up without love turns into a sociopath, and then hopefully finds love eventually on her own. And that's what happened to Tama. And that's great. That's a beautiful story. I think on the sort of technical side of things, I would say, again, I think the character development was a little bit too abrupt for my taste. And it's important. I mean, stories are built through characters. That's at least the way I see it. I think stories are always, characters can be landscapes, they can be animals, like Jack London type, but there's always a character there. And I think these characters were a little too extreme. I think Dan's character is more subtle. his depression, his indecisiveness, and his lack of love is strong. I mean, you can see that his mother is like Tama's mother. I mean, both of these kids are abandoned by their parents. Although Dan has a father who sticks with him, the father's too strong. Excuse me, the father lacks strength to really be the support there. And I'm not sure if if that is, and this would be my biggest sort of no go here in this book is the social aspects of the book, like the I guess the girl power stuff. The women are abandoning their kids, and where are the fathers? I mean, Dan's father is there. Why isn't he able to? Why isn't Dan taking his support and his love? Just because he works construction doesn't make him a bad person. And the woman, the mother, is a former writer, and somehow she has more street cred than the father. I think that some of the things went wrong there. I thought that Tallent's sort of mix up of climbing as a sport and a social or a socioeconomic message, in my opinion, misguided. Although using climbing as a metaphor for life, that is actually a really good idea. And I've spoken about this also in the impression, because climbing is one of those sports that requires meticulous problem solving. It's a step-by-step process. It's a sport where small little steps lead to big achievements. Maybe every sport's like that, but this one's extreme because you have these problems, right? You have to climb a certain wall, and it's never the whole wall. It's always one step after another. And that's, for people who follow climbing, that's pretty clear. Like, you might think, oh my gosh, how can they climb this steep wall? But then when you break it down into all the small problems, you realize that actually it is achievable. And I think that's how life is. And I think Tama actually looks at life like that, and that's what makes her strong in the end. And Dan, for some reason, still doesn't see it. I mean, his the last scene in the book with Dan is not very hopeful. Yes, he gets to this fancy Northwestern private college. I think it's Reed College, so Steve Jobs went. $200,000 free ride, all that stuff. It's beautiful, but he's not very happy about it because he has, the purpose of life, which it's embedded in love. It's more than that, of course, but it has to start with love. It has to start with, you have to have parents, siblings, friends, spouses, somebody that you love, and then you can build on that and create things and build things, and then hopefully pursue a better life for the next generation, which in my opinion is the purpose of life. Thank you.